welcome all to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law Fellowship Opportunities Informational Webinar. I think we're going to give another few minutes before we get started. I feel like we should have some music going. Welcome music. Okay, so I guess we'll get started with the information webinar.
Yes, welcome everyone. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and wherever you are in the world, welcome. A few reminders before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, so be aware of that. If you would like to see closed captions, you can take advantage of the live transcript feature, which is at the bottom right, sort of next to the leave button. And if you have any questions, just drop that in the chat. And there's also a Q&A feature. So as you develop questions, if you're curious about anything or you have questions in a moment, please drop that down into the Q&A chat, and we'll be sure to address it as the webinar progresses and during our Q&A session. So before we introduce ourselves, we'll introduce the Lawyers Committee. The Lawyers Committee is a legacy civil rights organization that was founded in 1963 by the Kennedy administration to leverage the resources of the private bar on behalf of civil rights. As all of you know, that was the height of the civil rights movement. And since that time, we've been working on behalf of civil rights and racial justice and racial equity. We work in a number of areas, including education, housing, criminal justice, digital justice, policy, voting rights, and we have a Stop Hate, the Byrd Center to Stop Hate. And all of our teams work on litigation or advocacy. Most teams work on both. And again, we leverage the resources of the private bar on behalf of all of those different civil rights issues. So if any of my colleagues want to add anything, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll introduce ourselves. So I can start. My name is Yvonne Lee Noisette. I'm a fellow on the Education Opportunities Project. I've been with the Lawyers Committee for about 1.5 years, and it's been a tremendous journey. I've learned so much from my colleagues, and we'll get into much of that during our, throughout the course of our webinar. So welcome again.
I will go next. Hi, everybody in attendance. My name is Brianna Jenkins, pronouns she, her, hers. I am the current George and Lindsay Fellow. I work in the Educational Opportunities Project along with Yvonne Lee. And I started at Lawyers Committee last September, and it's just been such a phenomenal, wonderful experience. And I hope that throughout the course of this webinar, we can really illuminate some of the experiences that we have had working with the fellowship as well as working for the organization as a whole.
I'm Noah Barron. I'm the current Shostak Fellow at the Lawyers Committee and also have the title of counsel. I work across all of our different projects, the Lawyers Committee, and I started at the Lawyers Committee in October of 2019. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
Hi, my name is Ryan Snow. I use he, him pronouns. I am an associate counsel in the Voting Rights Project, and I started as a fellow in September of 2018 with the Lawyers Committee, and I started as associate counsel in February of this year. So I will get started with just describing briefly our fellowship program, which is really integral to the work that we do. because our legal fellows are involved in all aspects of our legal work. And currently we have 10 legal fellows working across our various project areas. And we're currently accepting fellowships for 3 different types of fellowships, 2 of which we'll focus on. And in particular one, which is the George N. Lindsay Fellowship. It's a 1-year fellowship funded by the Lawyers Committee and provided to 1 applicant each year. And just briefly, George Lindsay was a very accomplished attorney, a partner at Debevoise and Plimpton, who devoted much of his career to the fight for civil rights throughout the height of the civil rights movement and beyond, working with a number of organizations, including the Lawyers Committee, and really was a shining example of how the Lawyers Committee works with the private bar to advance civil rights and racial justice, and how successful that has been as a model for civil rights enforcement, even against the backdrop of changing administrations and leadership at the Justice Department. I'll actually put in the chat a list of past Lindsay Fellows that you can take a look at, in addition to the 2 that we have as part of our fellowships committee, and also including one, Thomas Silverstein, who we're hoping can join us a little bit later and share a bit about his experience, who's started as a Lindsay Fellow and still now, I think 5 or 6 years later, as a counsel in our fair housing project. So let me see if I'm doing this right. Great. Link to a list of past fellows, Lindsay Fellows. In addition to the Lindsay Fellowship, we also have a number of fellows working on sponsored externally funded fellowships, which are 1 or 2 year fellowships, where the Lawyers Committee accepts a number of applicants to then develop a project with our project directors and teams to develop a project proposal to then obtain a funding from another organization such as SCAD and Equal Justice Works or Justice Catalyst. And this is another annual application process that we're now starting. In addition to that, we also accept externally funded fellowships where the applicant comes to us with funding already confirmed, whether from your law school, firm, or other organization, and we accept those applications on a rolling basis. Brianna, you're muted.
Thank you. So now I will talk about both of the applications, the requirements of both of the applications that we are asking you to submit for the first round of applications. So we're going to start with the George and Lindsay Fellow. Well, we're going to start with the George and Lindsay Fellowship, but the externally funded fellowship, we have the same requirements that you must submit with your application. You should submit a resume, a cover letter describing your interest in the fellowship. You should also submit a self-edited writing sample. And also you should submit a law school transcript with your application. It can be official or it can be unofficial. And you should submit them as a single PDF document and you upload it through the Podio website. And just to get a little bit deeper into your cover letter, particularly for the Lindsay Fellowship, your cover letter, you should be describing a project you want to do, but it's important to know that the 4 people that you see on this call, we are the fellowship selection committee. So we will be the ultimate ones reading through all of your applications and really going through the process of selecting who is going to be the Lindsay Fellow for the 2022 to 2023 year. So your cover letter, you should treat your cover letter as a personal statement. We should get to have a sense of who you are, what and why you're committed about this particular work, why you're committed to working in this particular area, and why Lawyers Committee. Everybody that's applying for this is a highly competitive fellowship. Everybody that's going to be applying, they're going to have all of the accolades, the law reviews, the good grade, and you should have those things. But what is something beyond the obvious to show that this particular organization, this particular fellowship, this particular line of work, what is your passion? What is your purpose? We should be able to glean that from one read of your cover letter. So make sure, and this is my advice for everybody, make sure you leave it all on the table. We should get a full sense of who you are and what you represent. And also for the externally funded fellowships, you should include that information in there too, and really, because you're going to be asked to discuss projects that you want to pitch. We need to know the passion behind why you want to pursue this particular project. So make sure now is not the time to be scared. Now is not the time to like underestimate yourself. Now is the time to really show us who you are. So hopefully you can get to that next stage where we select you for the second round of interviews. So yeah, just make sure to be yourself, be comfortable, but show us your passion. Show us your passion for why you want this. Also, make sure that anything that you submit, it's edited, that you reviewed it. We don't want to see no typos. We don't want to see no mistakes. You need to be making sure that anything you're sending us, that it's your best representation, it's your best work. And again, for the Lindsay Fellowship, those applications will be due this Friday, June the 18th, by midnight. The deadline will be strictly enforced, so you still have time to get your application materials in for the Lindsay Fellowship. Also, for the externally funded fellowships, those applications are due on July 9th, Friday, July 9th at 11:59 p.m. So make sure that you have taken note of those due dates and that you submit your materials by those respective due dates, because we want to read your applications. We want to read as many the due date is in Eastern Standard Time. Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, by midnight. Let's clarify the Lindsay due date. The Lindsay due date again is due by this Friday. Oh, excuse me. Y'all please be patient with us. We've had to make some adjustments. Excuse me. The Lindsay Fellowship will be due Friday, June the 25th. Excuse me. It'll be due Friday, June the 25th at midnight. So please take note of that. Please be sure to get your submissions in on time, because like I said before, we want to be able to read as many applications as we can so we can get to know all of you, so we can make the ultimate decision on who will be the Lindsay Fellow, and then we'll read the applications for the externally funded fellowship, and then we'll be able to read and select and interview the people who will represent those externally funded fellowships. So now,
just a quick note. Sorry, I just checked, and we attempted to update the form on the website. The form on the website still does say June 18th, but please do note that it's been moved to June 25th to give you all a little more time to apply. Yeah, but we'll get that updated soon. But all other aspects of the application are identical.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for letting me know that. So just again, one more time for all of our attendees, the Lindsay Fellowship will be due Friday, June the 25th at midnight. I mean, not at midnight, by 11:59 p.m. And the externally funded fellowship applications will be due by Friday, July 9th by 11:59 p.m. So make sure you take note of that, make a reminder in your iCal or your Google Calendar, just so that you can get those submitted on time. And now I'm going to transition to us, the Fellowship Selection Committee, talking about our individual experiences as fellows here at Lawyers Committee. I will go first as the current George and Lindsay Fellow. This in my experience will end in September. This is one of the best decisions that I made for my legal career post law school. Just so you should know that once you come here, they're going to treat you like a lawyer on day one, and it's scary and you don't know what you're doing, but it's one of those experiences that you grow exponentially. You're given so much responsibility. You're forced to grow. You're forced to interact with other lawyers within the organization, across other organizations, and you get to work on cutting edge civil rights work that I don't think I would have had this experience anywhere else. So I'm just really fortunate to have had the experiences that I've had while working here. I've been really fortunate to connect with the lawyers that work here, because one thing about lawyers committee, a lot of the lawyers that work here, they are highly experienced. Before they even get to these positions, they just have years of experience doing various types of direct service legal work or very extensive litigation work, and it really shows in their experience and how they lead their department and how they do their jobs. And it's really has educated me. It's really inspired me to want to be better as a young attorney. So for anybody that gets this experience or gets to work for this organization, it really is transformative. And and this is someplace that I would want to come back to once I get more experience, so that I could contribute to the mission of the organization. And I will turn it over to Yvonne Lee, who was my predecessor for the George and Lindsay Fellowship. So Yvonne Lee.
Thank you, Brianna. So I want to echo everything that Brianna shared. It's an excellent organization. You learn a ton from your colleagues, and the directors do make a point to throw you into the work, but provide you with all the support that you'll need to be successful. So that's one aspect of the work that I've sort of really enjoyed when I was a Lindsay Fellow and post-Lindsay Fellow as just a fellow on the Education Opportunities Project. Each project is different, so the directors will navigate differently, but there is an ethos in the organization that runs across all the different teams. Just as a few examples, Brianna and I right now are involved in at least 3 or 4 different investigations. We can't discuss them because they're confidential, but we are actively investigating matters that will likely end up as litigation or some other sort of advocacy project or a complaint submitted to an agency. So there are multiple streams of work on all of our teams. To give you a couple more examples, I've written comment letters, I've drafted portions of amicus briefs, drafted portions of motions for intervention or other briefs, certainly done research on all those other matters, as has Brianna. And all of the members of our team have been involved in sort of client relationship management, many different advocacy projects. I was fortunate to sort of lead a grant-funded project that our team is involved in right now that has 2 coalitions in 2 different states with regard to higher education, equity. We work with a team of researchers on our project that's working on cutting-edge research with regard to racial equity in higher education that we'd be happy to share more about if we had more time. We've connected with lawmaker staffers to try to sort of see without lobbying, just how we can impact and create an ecosystem of ideas that the civil rights community can weigh in on different kinds of matters and how those things translate into policy. We've written sign-on letters that have impacts on organizations all across the country. So we can go on and on and on about the different experiences. I think the biggest point is you'll have multiple streams of work. You'll have the opportunity to work in an area that you really care about. Much of the work is cutting edge. You will have time to interact with executive management, and your colleagues are sort of brilliant. They'll challenge you, they'll push you. And again, it's an excellent experience that I would recommend to everyone and anyone. And I'll let Noah or Ryan speak next. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivan Lee. Yeah, so like the others have said, one of the really great things about being a fellow at the Lawyers Committee is that you're treated as an attorney and they take your ideas seriously. If you want to do something, if you have a particular interest in the area of law and have an idea for a case or an investigation, you can put together a memo essentially pitching the idea to the chief counsel or the project director, and oftentimes they will allow you to go through with that idea if they feel there's merit to it. And of course, there'll be pushback. They'll want you to explain why you want to do this idea, the basis for it. And all of that, I think, is a sign of how seriously the Lawyers Committee takes its fellows. And so like the other folks here, I've participated in investigations, participated in litigation. I've helped draft appeals to state Supreme Courts, excuse me. I worked on amicus briefs at all levels, including state court, federal district court, federal appellate court, the US Supreme Court. I've done all manner of advocacy in terms of policy work and regulatory advocacy. And so the work at the Lawyers Committee really runs the gamut and gives you exposure to all kinds of different varieties of legal work. So with that, I'll pass the baton to Ryan to talk about his experience.
And really, I would echo everything that's been said. I mean, it's amazing. We're all working in different projects and contexts, but it really is an organization-wide kind of ethos, and that includes certainly empowering fellows to essentially function as a staff attorney. We are given our own portfolio, we're given our own responsibilities, but we're also given the opportunity and the encouragement to do our own investigations, develop our own cases, and do all manner of other advocacy work in all different contexts. So, certainly I can share my experience in the Voting Rights Project. We've been doing a lot of defensive, both litigation and advocacy. Obviously, there's been a lot of assaults on voting rights recently, but even with that, I've been able to, develop my own ideas and do my own legal research and present ideas for, things that we should be following up on. And a lot of that work actually comes from working with coalition partners in states that we work in. So in the Voting Project, we work with about 30 different state coalitions, and which includes state and local organizations, grassroots organizations. So it's included a lot of coalitional work, which has been really great. We also we have full-time organizers on staff who lead a lot of that coalitional work. But that's certainly been one of the most rewarding aspects of my experience, has been able to be the lead attorney in a number of states, which I'm an associate counsel now, but that started when I was a fellow, being given that kind of responsibility, being introduced to our leads in those states, and essentially been handed over to me and said, okay, with support obviously, but allowed to kind of take ownership of that, develop those relationships, and the work flows from there. So I don't know if I can add much more beyond that to what the others have said. There is a question in the chat that I think Noah's going to answer. We can answer it. Currently, we're all remote. We're fully remote. I'm actually also part of the committee that's a joint committee between staff and management, developing a plan for a voluntary return to work, which would not be mandatory or full return, but would be developing kind of a safe plan to return to work. But that's not here yet, and we don't even have a date set for that yet. So it's hard to answer your question because we can't see that far into the future necessarily, but we don't really know what's going to look like when more and more people are vaccinated. We also don't know what's going to happen. We know that there are variants. It's really hard to kind of predict that, but we can tell you that right now we've been fully remote since mid-March of last year. Many people, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia with my family, where I went to school, and I was commuting up and back and forth every week, even before the pandemic, and so there's support for that. I think if we were fully in the office again in a year or two or whatever, it would be hard not to be in DC, just because that's where your colleagues are and there's meetings and whatnot. But we have all adapted to remote work, and we work with our teams and whatnot. So again, it's hard to predict the future, but I think I think it's safe to say that there will be a lot of support for a hybrid model or a lot of remote work. Although I think it probably will make sense to be in the DC area. Is that safe to say? Does anyone have any of that? It's very uncertain these times.
Yeah, so what I guess I would add is that you should, of course, there's nothing certain, but you should be prepared to be at the DC office of the Lawyers Committee on a pretty regular basis. So that may be difficult if you're still living in, for example, New York or something. But you can live wherever you want as long as you're able to make it to the office.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably something to, as the application process goes on, and even farther, that would be something to be in touch with, if that was something that, was important to you to have certainty on, that would be something to raise in interviews and try to get as much as possible. But yeah, we can't give any guarantees right now. How many externally funded fellows do you sponsor? And this really, it varies. I don't think we don't have a set number. It varies every year, and it really depends on, you know, the number of applicants we get and the strength of the applications. And certainly, you know, we have to, you know, it's, we work with applicants to do the sponsorship, and we have to get the sponsorship approved by the funding organizations too. So there's a number of variables there.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It would depend on the need of the particular project, or well, not even the need, how many applicants that lawyers committee will be willing to sponsor. So I think that it would have to be on a case by case basis. We couldn't give like a hard number right now. And then I just wanted to back up what Noah said in reference to like the remote working. So I started fully remote. I will most likely end my fellowship in September fully remote. I did relocate from the Chicago area where I went to law school back to the DC area, and I don't know if we're coming back in the office anytime soon. So I know it's a couple of people that live in different places, but like Noah said, you should have your life set up to be prepared to at least be as local as you can be. And you still would have to work East Coast hours because when we have our meetings or when we're scheduling stuff, it is around East Coast time. So you should just be mindful and just be aware of that you would still be expected to run and function off of East Coast time. So as you all can tell, we are in our question and answer time. So if you have any additional questions, now will be the time to get all of your questions out to the people that will be reviewing your applications. We will answer everything to the best of our ability, but now is the time to ask all of your questions. And thank everybody that has been asking questions while we've been presenting, and we've been able to answer all of them so far.
Yeah, and if you think of questions after the webinar is over, you can always email fellowship@lawyerscommittee.org, and we'll get that. We'll be able to respond with questions. I did want to just add one more note on the kind of an answer to the question about externally funded fellowships, and Brianna kind of touched on this, and just to expand, like they're based on kind of our project needs and capacity, right? So when you're putting together a proposal, you know, the strong proposals are going to be ones that kind of already fit with the work we're doing. There doesn't have to be stuff we're already doing. It can be a new idea, but certainly if you're going to want to craft your proposal to line up with the work that we're already doing, and you know, we want to be able to see that you know what about the work that we're doing in the project area you're applying for. But you know, so that's going to make it more likely that we can sponsor you if we feel like it fits with our existing expertise, our existing relationships, our existing work. As far as that. And then also on that note, I wanted to flag, it's on the application information, but if you want to apply for both the Lindsay and a sponsored externally funded fellowship, please do indicate that on your Lindsay fellowship application, because we staggered the applications in part to give a chance for really competitive applicants who weren't selected for Lindsay to still be able to apply for the sponsored fellowships.
And I will also say, so Ryan put the list of former fellows in the chat. You should definitely, if you want more information, or if you want to speak to more people besides us who are on the committee, or maybe project directors, you should definitely reach out to former fellows. How you get into contact with them, I'm not going to know. That's going to depend on your tenacity. I know when I applied for this fellowship, I knew a former fellow. Her name was Jennifer Coco. I had met her during a service trip. She worked at another civil rights organization, but she was an alumni of my school, DePaul. So I met her, and then she connected me to another former Lindsay fellow, Andrew Hairston, who also worked in the Educational Opportunities Project. And that was my opportunity to ask all of the additional questions that I needed to ask, just about what to expect from the fellowship, the application process. So if you know that you want to do a project, or you know you want to work in a certain area, you should find these people on LinkedIn. See if they have an email. See if you can connect with them. You have until the 25th to get your application materials in, but you have to really be tenacious and have that fire behind you to really interview people so you can get a feel for the work, a feel for the culture, a feel for the people that this organization produces, and really see if, in particular, the Lindsay Fellowship will be a good fit for you.
So
Oh, go ahead, Imani.
So this is building on what everyone has mentioned, but just want to emphasize this point. We know many of you are applying to many organizations right now. It comes with the territory post law school, but we really do want to know why you're interested in racial justice and equity. So being able to articulate that is going to be really important on your application. And also the fit with the organization is important. So what Ryan just mentioned about knowing what we do, the scope of what we do, and how your proposal will fit in it, you do want to take some time to think about that. If you have a legal theory, really spend some time pondering and putting it together so that it's clear, it's concise, because on a cover letter, you do have to be concise. And if you get an interview, you're able to talk about it fluently. So we really do want to emphasize that. So we would discourage folks who are just sending the same application to any and everyone without taking a look at what the Lawyers Committee does. If you're not really familiar with it, take some time to figure out what we do. Look on the website, talk to folks, reach out to folks, and make sure your project, your proposal fits. And also be able to answer that question about what brings you to racial justice and racial equity work as sort of a lifelong career, as opposed to something someone may just want to dabble in for a few months or a year. That's a really distinguishing feature about the Lawyers Committee. Most of the folks here have sort of committed for a career to racial justice work, and it'll be clear sort of from what you've done in law school, and if you've worked before law school, some of what maybe you did before law school.
And I would add that even if you haven't done racial justice work before, you shouldn't hesitate to apply, but you should articulate in your cover letter why you are interested in racial justice work, or what led you to be interested now as opposed to previously. And we have another question. Do you have recommendations for what makes a strong writing sample apart from good formatting? So what I would say is that a good writing sample should, so I know the difficulty of applying for jobs in terms of writing samples, because when you're coming out of law school, you don't have many often. But what I would say is that it should tackle a legal issue. It should be well organized, and that it should not have typos or all other kinds of errors in it. And it should be primarily your work. It shouldn't be very overly edited.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think if it's something that you wrote for like a class that you were in, like a legal writing 3 or anything for a class, it's fine. If it's for a class, if it's for work, it's fine. Really what we want to see, we want to see that you are paying attention to detail, i.e. grammatical error. There are little to no grammatical errors. Things are spelled right. Things are formatted right. But we really want to see how you think, how you analyze the law, because a lot of times with a lot of our projects, we are tackling novel areas of law, or we're tackling areas of law where we have to be very creative with our arguments and how we approach things to kind of distinguish ourselves and get the result that we want. So we want to know that if your project director throws you into a situation or says, I need you to write this, and you take the first stab at it, we want to know that it's kind of in your realm of things that you could handle under pressure. So really, we just want to see your ability to interpret and to argue and all of those things.
Yeah, I agree with absolutely with all that. I would just add and emphasize clarity, and clarity in explaining your thought or your argument And only, because it's often very fast paced. And if you're writing for something for a supervisor that's going to go in another memo or a brief, you want to be very clear about what you're trying to say and then why and what support you have for that.
And it doesn't have to be, we do prefer that it be legal in nature in terms of a legal memo or a brief or something. But if you don't have that, you feel free to submit, for example, your note, really anything that's legal related that also showcases your ability to think critically and creatively.
And I think if it's something related to one of our practice areas, that would be even better.
Well, there's another question. Are there min-max page limits for the writing sample? I would say no, except we might not read the whole thing. So you might want to just pick the best section of it. And I don't know, I'd say 5 to 10 pages is probably as much as you want to put in. Is that right?
Right. Like if you're using something from like your appellate brief from your legal writing class, you don't need to send us the 30-page brief. Just if you could just send us the 10 pages from the argument section, just so we can figure out what's going on. You don't need to send us the statement of facts and the jurisdiction. Like, we get it. Just send us we want to see the rules, the law, and the analysis.
Yeah,
I would say that.
Feel free to chop that up too. Like if you have, if you have a 20, 30-page memo brief or something, you can cut it to say, intro to the second, include let's say you want to include the third issue or something, right? You can give us what we need to get there, ellipses, and then the section he wants to read.
And I've always been what I've learned to adapt when I'm submitting writing assignments. If it's like a section for something bigger, just taking like using the header and taking like a couple of sentences to explain the context of what this is, just to let us know, okay, I wrote this for such and such class. I represent the plaintiff, la 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 la. Just so like we're not reading it cold, just so we can kind of get a sense of what the context of the writing assignment is. Even if it's a memo too, I still just write it just so that the reader just has the context of what's going on. You want to make things easier for your reader so they can give you more points. Y'all are a quiet set.
To answer the other question, I believe that we do prefer that you limit yourself to one writing sample. Unless others disagree with you.
No, I agree with you, Noah. Just want to mention one thing. We don't want this writing sample piece to be discouraging to anyone. So this definitely shouldn't deter anyone from applying. It's just one aspect of the project. And as all of you know, there's no such thing as good writing. It's only good rewriting. So when you're at the lawyers committee, you'll get plenty of feedback from your entire team, as well as your director. We're all in the process of constantly getting better and sharpening our tools. And folks recognize that it'll be your first opportunity out of law school. So you'll get more support and more feedback when you're writing. So please don't allow this. If you don't think you have the perfect writing sample, still apply, still submit the sample that you do have. It's one aspect of a much broader project that we're looking at when evaluating your application.
Yeah, and again, the emphasis is to see how you think. It's to see how you think about stuff. We have another question. Should a project proposal be very specific? It sounds like a balancing act to meet your needs while being creative. Who wants to take that?
That's a great question. So you can only explain so much in a cover letter. You can't go into tremendous detail. So part of that is trying to understand how you think, like how you develop a legal theory and how you approach sort of building a case, or how you would try to convince your director or the chief counsel of taking an approach to, solving an issue or addressing an issue through the law. So whether that's specific litigation or advocacy, we just want to get a sense of how you're thinking and how you're developing a legal theory. And again, the fit is what's important. So understand what the team is doing, whatever your project, if it's criminal justice issue or education issue or voting rights issue, understand what the Lawyers Committee does and see how your project can fit. You do want to be concise. So the more you sort of think about it, the more you can distill it into a letter.
Yeah, and for example, I can talk about my proposal that I wrote for my application. So my proposal, I wanted to represent Black and Brown LGBTQ students who were experiencing educational school push out. So my cover letter talked about how first it talked about like the state of the issue, and then I talked about how I wanted to use advocacy and litigation to directly challenge the issue that is happening at schools nationwide. And then I kind of brought some legal theory. I think I talked a little bit about due process. I talked a little bit about equal protection, just to show my reader that I kind of had some familiarity with the type of claims that I was likely to bring if I had a client and it got to the situation where I wanted to sue a school or sue a school system for discrimination against these type of students. So and again, I put all of those things in the cover letter to show that, hey, this is a project that that I'm passionate about, and I've thought about it this far. Now, me coming to this, and I also knew that my project would most likely fit in the Educational Opportunities Project because it was part of the work that they were all already doing through different cases that I researched that they had worked on. My particular project that I was proposing, I knew I would have to argue why it would be a good fit for the Educational Opportunities Project. And then once I moved through the additional stages of the interviewing process, I had to defend why this particular proposal would be a good fit for the Educational Opportunities Project.
We have other questions from folks. We want to get to as many questions as possible. We have about 15 minutes.
Just to emphasize on the last question too, like you will work with, for accepted applicants, you will work with our project directors and staff to develop their project proposal before submitting it to the funding organization. So you'll have a lot of support for that. And I think it was, I forget who mentioned it earlier, but as you feel free during the application process to reach out to folks here who are already on our staff who are doing this work. And you can reach, if you prefer to reach out to us as well, and we can try to put you in touch with someone to consult with about your proposal.
I will say that for the externally funded fellowships, you will work more directly with the project director or whatever counsel from that team to develop your project to get it ready to apply for like Skadden or EJW. But from what I remember with George and Lindsay Fellow, I don't think I met anybody, like I didn't work like with anybody from the education team to like develop my project during like the interview process. So yeah, I just wanted to, and I don't know if that was the same for you, Avonlea, but was that the same for you, Avonlea? Or
it was.
I think but did you intern or?
Yes.
Okay.
So I did have the benefit of interning for the organization a semester or 2 semesters prior from law school, but I didn't, for the Lindsay application, interact with anyone from the team.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So for the Lindsay application, you don't really interact. You won't really interact with your team until you were selected for the fellowship, as opposed to the externally funded fellowships. Once you make it past the second round, then you'll be able to collaborate with the particular project to like further develop your application to submit it to like a Skadden or Equal Justice Works project. So we have another question. One, how long is the Lindsay Fellow cover letter? 2, how long is the project proposal for the externally funded fellowship? And 3, is there a downside in applying for both?
So I can say that, one, for the cover letter for Lindsay, use your judgment. So obviously don't use size 6 font to try to get in everything that you want. I think that's pretty clear to folks, but use your best judgment. So if you're applying for, if this is your first professional opportunity and you just don't have any ideas about how to write a cover letter, then we would encourage you to try to find resources either from your law school or other folks in your network about that. If you really are having trouble just crafting a cover letter, just a generic cover letter, then email fellowships@lawyerscommunity.com, and maybe we can just point you to some generic templates of a cover letter that would be used for any opportunity. So the answer to that is use your judgment. If you're completely lost, then we'll send you just a generic template to help you out there. For the project proposal for externally funded, both SCAD and EJW at least have specific requirements for length. So you'll get that from SCAD and EJW. Other externally funded fellowships will have requirements as well. So that should provide guidance, and there is no downside in applying for both. Again, we encourage you, whether you want to apply for just one or both, take your time to develop thoughtful responses to the questions and take your time to write a compelling cover letter, and definitely review your resume and make sure that it's in good shape.
Yeah, just to also emphasize, we're as the fellowships committee, we're here to support you as applicants, and we want to make sure, we know that different applicants are going to have different amounts of support from their law school and career department, whatnot. So, we are here as a resource for you as well. I want to emphasize that. That's why we wanted to do this webinar. We appreciate all your questions. And we're actually just joined by another former Lindsay Fellow who is joining us, and we appreciate you joining, Thomas.
Hi, thank you.
So we've all kind of introed ourselves and shared a little bit about our work, and we'd love to hear your perspective and a bit about your path.
Sure. My name is Tom Silverstein. I am the Associate Director of the Fair Housing and Community Development Project, the Lawyers Committee. I was actually just promoted today to that position, but I've been here for a while. And as an attorney, I started out here as a fellow from 2013 to 2014 as the Lindsay Fellow. And I also helped run our fellowship selection committee from 2015 to either 2018 or 2019. And one of the sort of joys of being here has been actually to play a role in helping to bring folks like Ryan and Ivan here as fellows who were selected while I was working on that. But my route to the Lawyers Committee, I think, was pretty direct. I actually was a legal assistant at the Lawyers Committee for 2 years between college and law school. And that's obviously not a route that's going to be available for everyone. But I think aspects of how I worked my way back to the Lawyers Committee are things from which people can derive some lessons. And there's a lot in this work that is about sort of maintaining and nurturing relationships. I think you think about all the places, if you're, interning at the Lawyers Committee this summer, think about how you stay in touch with folks over time, in an in-person climate in the future, try to get coffee or lunch with your former supervisors if you happen to be in town in the future, reminds people of who you are. It, reinforces to them your commitment to the work. And I think that one of the things I did over the course of the time I was in law school that was really helpful was, and this was made somewhat easier by the fact that my family is from the DC area, so I was frequently back up around here. But I would check in with my former supervisors and meet up with them, and that really, I think, redounded to my benefit when I was applying for fellowships. I'm sure you've heard a lot about cover letters and resumes and interview skills, and all of that is important. And coming up with a good fellowship idea, if it's a project-based fellowship. But the thing that I would add, and I think that resonates most with my personal experience, is that maintaining relationships is really, really key. I'd be happy to answer any questions as well. I will throw out one bit of my just like personal axe to grind is on the whole subject of fellowships, I really do hope that at some point the public interest legal sector moves away from a focus on really project-heavy, project-based fellowships, because I don't think that's a good model. And I think that we should be giving people more opportunities to grow, doing the day-to-day work that an organization already has on its docket. I think it's better for young attorneys, and it's better for their host organizations and better for their client communities.
Appreciate that perspective, and just to share, I didn't share about my own path. I came with a pre-funded fellowship from my law school. I went to the University of Virginia School of Law, and they provide a post-grad fellowship that was very flexible. When I was applying, I knew I wanted to work in voting rights, and that was why I went to law school. That was laser focused on voting rights, and there weren't a whole lot of project-based fellowships for voting rights because voting rights can often be a little bit removed from the communities that you're serving, because there's a lot of impact litigation on at the state level, for example. And there certainly were. I know I have friends who were co-interns when I was interning at organizations that did project-based fellowships, but again, they were hyper-focused on local communities. And I was interested in that, but I also really wanted to support particularly the work of the Lawyers Committee on a national level and across states. And so I came in with a bridge fellowship. They're often called bridge fellowships. And then I stayed on as an internally funded fellow and now associate counsel. But yeah, just to Tom's point, there's a lot of different ways to get into this work, and the project model isn't necessarily the best one, but it's what we've got right now. So we're going to work with you to make that work and get as competitive as possible.
So we have about 5 minutes remaining. Does anyone have some additional questions or a topic that you'd like us to address? So we know everyone here is at a different law school. Some law schools have more resources for public interest, aspiring attorneys and advocates more than others. So if you do have a public interest office, but you've never visited, we would encourage you to just check in and see if they have any resources for you. Maybe they can take a look at your cover letter or your resume, your essay or anything like that. That way you can feel more comfortable and confident in submitting your application. Again, just be aware that there are two different tracks here. There's the externally funded fellowship opportunities and the Lindsay Fellowship opportunity. You're encouraged to apply for both if you would like to. And you can reach us at fellowship@lawyerscommittee.org. Again, that email is fellowship@lawyerscommittee.org if you have additional questions. And we're here for another 4 minutes and happy to answer anything.
I have something I want to clarify real quick. So for the Lindsay Fellowship and the externally funded fellowship, the cover letter, it doesn't have to be as long as like the actual EJW application. So for instance, when I applied for the Lindsay Fellowship, I submitted a cover letter. My cover letter was about 1.5 pages, single space, 12-point font. It doesn't have to be like this exponentially long, like thought document. It should be, for me, it should be short and succinct enough where you're able to fully explain everything and get to the point. So again, I think like Ryan or Noah said, like use your best judgment. It doesn't have to be like super long or elaborate or long. It just needs to fully like flesh out who you are, flesh out why you're interested, and begin to flesh out your project just to show us that you've thought through it. But it doesn't have to be like 4 or 5. Like you could, I was able to do that in a page and a half, and I was able to interview and go through my process. So it doesn't we don't want to overwhelm you. We want you to put your best foot forward, but you can say what you need to say in a page and a half if that is what works for you.
Yeah, and it's in truth, it's often harder to make a stronger statement shorter because you want to say everything, and but they will be stronger. And I mean, one more specific note on that, don't be repeating what's on your resume. If you can reference experience that you've had and explain why it's important or how it was impactful on you and inspiring for you, it's more like the why to go with the what on your resume, which may be helpful.
So it looks like we are at 2:00.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this webinar. We hope that it's been helpful for you and informative. And we look forward to reading your applications.
Thank you all.
All right, bye-bye.